Yeah, so I'm making a series of videos on lying fathers, and the next person I'd like to talk about is Sigmund Freud, who I'm going to go. I'm just going to call him Freud, Sigmund Freud, because basically he lied. So the part one I spoke about Paul Warburg, who's known as the father of the Federal Reserve. So this is part two. So. Sigmund Freud was from Austria and is known as the father of psychoanalysis, or the father of psychology. But does it really serve society to cover up the nasty bits and only present the nice parts about what Sigmund Freud did? How are we to make informed decisions when the full truth is not available to us? So this article I'm going to read is going to talk about some of the nasty things about Freud, which have been covered up. So number one, he was an avid drug user, an enthusiastic user and promoter of cocaine. He used the substance frequently until his death in 1939. In fact, he was so fond of the drug, he actively distributed it among his friends and associates, which in some cases resulted in drug addiction, as with his close friend Ernst von Flischl Maxkow. He was also a defender of child molestation. This is a thing that's most troubling about Sigmund Freud. As Freud embarked on the journey of psychoanalysis, he came across numerous cases of so-called hysterical individuals who showed alarming symptoms and behaviors in adult age. Unsurprisingly, most of his patients in the mid-1890s reported early childhood sexual abuse. Initially, he proposed that most mental illnesses were related to early sexual abuse, known as the seduction theory. But a couple of years later, he took a 180-degree turn and instead concluded that his patients' memories of sexual abuse were mere fantasies and completely made up. The new theory instead was named infantile sexuality. He actually seriously presented a theory where the cause was not adults preying on children, but that the child itself is lusting over his or her parents and seeking bodily sexual pleasure thereof. As the Internet Encyclopedia of Psychology describes it, from his account of the instincts or drives, it followed that from the moment of birth, the infant is driven in his actions by the desire for bodily sexual pleasure, where this is seen by Freud in almost mechanical terms as a desire to release mental energy. So Sigmund Freud believed that from the time a child was born, they had a desire for sexual pleasure, which is nonsense and totally an abomination. So initially, infants gain such release and derive such pleasure from the act of sucking. Freud accordingly terms this the oral stage of development. This is followed by the stage in which the locus of pleasure or energy release is the anus, particularly in the act of defecation, and this is accordingly termed the anal stage. Then the young child develops an interest in its sexual organs as a site of pleasure, which is called the phallic stage, and develops a deep sexual attraction for the parent of the opposite sex and a hatred of the parent of the same sex, the Oedipus complex. In other words, Freud was saying that kids fantasize sexually over their parents, and that's why they have distresses in adult age. And also, remember, he said that as adults, when people came to him talking about the trauma that they went through when they were sexually assaulted either by their parents or by someone else, that they were actually making these things up because they were making these things up, or they actually initiated all these things because they wanted them. He had serious women issues. His relationship to women was disturbed, to say the least, and he never really developed any kind of healthy relationships with a significant other. He considered women to be weak, vain, jealous, and lacking a good sense of justice. He believed that women's problems, in essence, stemmed from them not having a penis. Very interesting. He even went as far, so basically just going back to that point, just read it again. Freud believed that women's problems, in essence, stem from them not having a penis. So women are supposed to have a penis as well. He even went as far as claiming that women are the problem in society. In fact, a lot points towards him having more than just friendly relationships with his male friends, and judging by letter correspondence uncovered with, for example, Willem Fleece, it appears the relationship was most probably of homosexual nature. In a letter written in response to an acquaintance that shared that he had dreamed of Freud naked, he responded by saying that I feel capable of handling everything and am pleased with the resultant greater independence that comes from having overcome my homosexuality. So that was Freud talking that he had overcome his homosexuality. It's a little known fact that the Freud's father, that Sigmund Freud's father, molested his own children, and that they all showed distinct symptoms of distress and trauma, something that troubled Freud deeply, and probably another reason as to why he dropped the seduction theory and proposed the infantile sexuality theory, a convenient way of explaining our abuse. As he writes in one of his letters during a time when he was engaging in psychoanalysis, he said, unfortunately, my own father was one of these perverts and is responsible for the hysteria of my brother, all of whose symptoms are identifications and those of several younger sisters. Today, it's commonly understood that victims of sexual abuse, when not having addressed and resolved the trauma, tend to, in higher frequencies, pass on the violence to the next generation. Freud's first and favorite daughter, Anna, showed signs of distress and mental illness, which later gave her the description of a jealous, depressed, masochistic, anorectic, latent homosexual teenager. In early adolescence, she developed a severe psychopathology consisting of sadomasochistic fantasies accompanied by compulsive masturbation, an eating disorder, and depression, symptoms of child abuse, which is probably what you're suffering from. So Sigmund Freud was an addict to cigarettes. He smoked up to 20 cigarettes a day. He eventually developed mouth cancer in 1923. For the next 16 years, he went through a whopping 33 surgeries and had a large prosthesis inserted to separate his sinus and jaw. Despite all this, he never stopped smoking, and consequently, that nasty habit led to his death. There are several disturbing facts that have been unraveled about Sigmund Freud, such as he treated a patient in 1900 and then dismissed that case as paranoia, which ended up that patient ended up hanging herself in a hotel room. Freud was overly preoccupied and lustful over money. In one letter, he wrote that money is laughing gas for me. On numerous occasions, he attempted to manipulate his clients into donating money to him, in effect abusing the trust given. In an article published in the New York Times, it revealed in one little known case that barely missed becoming a major scandal. Researchers say Freud induced two patients to divorce their spouses and marry each other. In addition, excuse me. In addition, he hinted that the man should make a generous donation to his psychoanalytic fund. So much of the coveted Freud material held by the Freud archives still remains unavailable to scholars. This includes at least 75,000 items stored in the United States Library of Congress. So those 75,000 items in Library of Congress, the public have been prohibited from accessing them, in some cases into the 22nd century. One might wonder what the Freud estate has to hide, going through such extreme measures to keep such a large quantity of documents secret to the public. As seen above, the so-called father of psychotherapy or psychoanalysis could hardly be considered a healthy, balanced man with good morals and wholesome behaviors. If he was practicing today, he would surely be robbed of his license and questioned for his dubious behaviors. As we move forward in our meetings with the School of Psychology, it is helpful to have the whole picture for those who want to study psychology. A healthy dose of common sense and critical standpoint is appropriate to apply for both the practitioners of Freudian theories and the recipients.